coming. Welcome to our first panel for the year. Can I please welcome Tony Behrman, Nicholas Carlin, Alexandra Sepulveda, Dave Murphy, and Alan Korn. So we're just going to go ahead and do a couple of opening questions and then possibly leave about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. I do want to acknowledge the founder of our club who is here, Pete Agnoletti. Raise your hand. So he started this club 2 years ago, and so we're really happy that it's going very strong for being such a new club, and we thank him for being with us today. So we'll go ahead and get started. Girls, if you want something to eat, it's up here. So I guess we'll just go down in order. So Tony, can you please explain a little bit about your practice area and how you got into entertainment and IP?
Okay, sure. Well, I grew up in New York, and I started out working in the music business there at Arista Records when I was in high school, and that really got me inspired to work in the music industry. And so eventually, after doing a lot of stuff in the industry, I decided to be an entertainment lawyer. So I went to New York Law School with the sole purpose of being an entertainment lawyer. And my practice focuses, we started out focusing on music law, representing bands and record companies, publishers, but really a lot of what I do today is stuff on the convergence of technology and entertainment. So a lot of companies that are designing very cool apps and online properties that deal with lyric websites, for example, and guitar tablature, and various technology companies that are doing music notation, things like that.
Thank you. Nicholas?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Berkeley and came from a artistic family. My mom is an actress and director. My dad's a painter. I grew up as a musician. And but I actually, when I went to law school, I didn't really want to be an entertainment lawyer. I just wanted to be a litigator. But it just so happened with the people I knew and the circles I traveled in, I used to play in a number of bands as well during and after law school. I just kind of naturally gravitated toward representing people in the entertainment business. So our practice now, at least my practice, is some entertainment, a lot of intellectual property, and most of it is litigation related.
You guys are so organized about your approach. Mine was not like that at all. So my practice areas, I work for a company called Kabam, which unless you're like a super nerdy gamer, you probably have no idea who that is. But we are mostly a mobile and tablet gaming company. So we have two games that you guys probably know. We have a game based on The Hobbit and a game based on Fast and Furious 6, which I didn't even know there were 6 movies, but there are. My practice areas, I do all of the IP for the company, but I also do all the day-to-day stuff. So whether it's an HR question from our studio in Austin, or dealing with German protection laws for when people sign up for an account on Kabam.com, that's all me. How I got into IP. I actually was a paralegal for a year and a half with someone in this room, Miss Sabrina Johnson, so we worked together, and then I went to law school, and when it came time to be a summer associate, it was right when the economy was starting to tank, and I was lucky that my firm actually offered me a summer associate position. So I started doing patent litigation for them, and then from there I got a full-time offer, started doing litigation for them, started doing some trademark stuff, and then General Mills called up one day and said, hey, are you interested in being a trademark lawyer for us? So then I spent 2.5 years with them, and then got another phone call saying, hey, we need a trademark lawyer. Are you interested in coming and working for a gaming company? So I for sure kind of slid my way into entertainment law.
So I have been practicing for less than a year, so my career is definitely a work in progress. But when I got licensed, well, I did IP because I love music and creativity in general, and then started talking to some entertainment lawyers, a couple of them are here, about what I should do to get into the industry. And so I worked at an entertainment firm as an intern, and then I worked at California Lawyers for the Arts as an intern, and then when I got licensed, I just started sort of hustling for clients, I started working for a couple friends for free that were doing interesting things, one of whom is a video game producer. And so I, by association, became somewhat competent in video game law. And I was doing a couple other things, doing some contract work for a couple IP attorneys, and as much other sort of IP-related entertainment law as I could. And then I met with a recruiter a few months ago, and this thing came up at Sega, and they needed somebody who had like my level of experience. And so here I am.
So I was a musician too. I was in a punk band in college, and then moved up here. I got a master's in communications, and I do some FCC law as well now. But I was in a band here. We had a pretty decent indie deal for the time, but it wasn't a good deal. And I swore that if I ever became a lawyer, I'd try to prevent people from entering into those kinds of deals. So I ended up going to school here actually about 20 years ago, and set out to work with musicians. But as the paradigm has shifted, I've worked a lot with documentary filmmakers, again with terrestrial radio stations, and just artists in different fields. So I still have a solo practice, primarily working with activists, musicians, etc. About 10 years ago, EFF had a referral for iOffer in their user-generated content kind of eBay marketplace. And I've been working with them 5 years part-time as in-house counsel. And that's been a real eye-opener in terms of seeing the tech shift and how people are dealing with intellectual property on the internet.
So Tony, again with you, what are the most challenging / interesting issues you face in your current practice?
Well, there are quite a few. I mean, like I said, I started out doing very traditional entertainment law, and so you could literally look in some form books that are available in your library and kind of find there's a record deal, there's a management contract. A lot of what I do is you're making up agreements that don't exist for very unusual situations, complex international licensing deals. So, which segues into the most challenging thing is international licensing. For example, if you're representing a website that has a vast global audience and you have to get content from different content owners, let's say a music publisher, you're always having to figure out where you have to get the rights for. Do you just get the US publishers into the system, get their content, and then you're off and running, or do you have to get licensed from all the territories? So you're looking at it as like a server-based model where, well, the company's here in the US, we got licenses in the US. Well, the publishers may not look at it that way. They would say, hey, we're a publisher in Germany, and you need to get licensed in Germany because you're serving content to people in Germany. So dealing with that is very complicated and at times very frustrating. That's an issue that is always in discussion, creating a global system of licensing. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, but it is definitely one of the big challenges, trying to make those deals work in a smart business way. It's going to protect your client, but not going to unduly burden them with a lot of licenses.
Any Nicholas?
Well, I'd say the most challenging aspect of this kind of business is just kind of keeping up with the technology and all the new trends that are happening. For example, we do a lot of class action work and on behalf of consumers and artists. And it seems like almost every day, there's some new app or some new program or something that is potentially violating people's rights. And in order to keep up with what's going on, we have to keep up with all the literature and the changes in the law. And it's very interesting, cutting-edge stuff because you're out there making the law. For example, we have privacy is now a very big issue on the internet, as I'm sure you all know. We have a class action now involving mobile apps, not your company, that social networking apps that were taking people's address books without consent. At least that's the allegation. And so in order to handle a case like that, you have to understand the technology and how do these apps actually work? How does the software work? How does the hardware work? And so, instead of just being a lawyer and doing your legal research like you learn in law school, you really also have to become a lot of other things. You have to become a technologist. You have to become someone who's familiar with all the latest social trends. So that's, I think that's the biggest challenge, as well as sort of one of the fun things about this area of law.
It's funny, I actually had down on my list as data privacy is for sure like one of the most complex and the thing that kind of keeps me up at night the most. In particular with in particular, since when it comes to IP, the distribution model has changed. Like it used to be, you could be really thoughtful about, okay, well, we're pushing out this content on a website and we'll be able to block the IP addresses coming in from XYZ country where we don't have the rights. Within iTunes, when you're pushing out an app, you can have worldwide distribution just by clicking one button. And that's great for the business, but for the lawyer, you're sitting there thinking to yourself, well, I don't know about the data privacy laws in Tunisia. Do I need to know? Is there going to be a problem there? So I would say that that's kind of the most challenging issue that I deal with kind of on data privacy. And the other piece of it is just kind of the day-to-day work of dealing with big IP partners, dealing with those big movie houses that are used to a very different business model. They're used to kind of slow, controlled pushing out of IP, whether it's, teaser scenes from The Hobbit, or they're used to being able to have a lot of control over their IP, and in kind of the world that we live in, it's not really like that anymore. So kind of working with those big partners to help them understand the business, which you're like, why is a lawyer talking to them about the business? But that's part of my job too, and one of the kind of challenging things that I deal with.
So definitely data privacy is something I was going to mention, but I think Alexander and Nicholas covered it pretty well. As a new lawyer, one of the biggest challenges is the job market. So, trying to become competent in a way that is desirable to people that you want to work for. And the challenge is that everything is new. So you want to make sure that you're competent enough to deal with these new issues, but you also take chances and take very calculated chances, but you don't want to turn away work that's interesting just because you've never done it before. So dealing with sort of that tension has been a challenge for me in my private practice. Data privacy is a big challenge for the mobile gaming market. And as far as what I find interesting, there have been some recent decisions, some very recent and some less recent, about sort of how intellectual property butts up against First Amendment rights for companies that are making creative content, and where that line is drawn, what the companies are allowed to do without permission and what they're not allowed to do. So I find that very interesting.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. That's like a fantastic area, and a very an area that's changing a lot right now. The stuff I kind of keeps me up at night is, how are my clients going to get paid? I work with a lot of old musicians, legacy artists, and the paradigm has shifted in trying to figure out new ways for them to get the material out there and make money at it. It's not as easy as it used to be, and they're not necessarily touring artists anymore. Figuring out different ways of distribution for their product now that record sales have died. With respect to like I offer, there's a lot of issues involving everything from the global issues they've talked about with trademarks, intellectual property rights. When you're based in the U.S., but you're dealing with a global situation in terms of rights in every country. Also, just dealing with IP rights owners and having to hold their hands and like walk them through a proper DMCA notice is surprisingly difficult sometimes, especially if they're not familiar with U.S. law. So it's a variety of issues, but a lot of them, like he was talking about, are really interesting, cutting edge stuff.
Thank you. So the next question I'd like to ask is, what do you think makes for a good lawyer in your areas of practice?
Well, I think, as Nick said, there's really a lot of keeping up with things, you know, in this area. And I think it's really important, and not just on the legal side, but in my experience, it's really important for my clients and for my practice that I'm well versed in the business, not just the law, but the business. How does their business work? How does the whole industry work? And so a lot of my time is spent just reading stuff about the business. You know, it could be reading very technical things, technical publications, or you could be reading Entertainment Weekly, you know, just stuff like that, just kind of seeing who's making what deals, what kind of things are popular, and just how it all fits together. You know, so I'm reading Billboard, I'm reading Digital Music News, which is an online journal, comes out every day, and things like that, and just kind of immersing yourself in all of that. And then, you know, going to conferences, speaking on panels, attending panels, not just lawyer panels, ABA stuff, but actual, you know, South by Southwest, talking to people at these events and just finding out, you know, what are the issues that are impacting their businesses. Because at the end of the day, your job is to be a problem solver. At least that's how I view my job. I'm not a litigator. I'm there to make deals happen for my client and to protect their business and to grow their business. And so it's really important for me to understand what their concerns are and how I can solve their problems for them.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Tony. Entertainment law is not really a field of law. It's representing people in an area of business. So it's really important to understand the area of business that your clients are in. You have to understand how the business works. I mean, I have clients, you know, entertainment law clients. For example, we represent a record company right now who's having a lease dispute with their landlord. So is that entertainment law or real estate law? I have another client, a band with a leaving member, and we're dealing with a trademark issue. So we have a case before the Trademark Trial and Appeal Board. We have song infringement cases. For example, we had the case against Avril Lavigne for I Want to Be Your Girlfriend, if any of you remember that one. We represented the Rubinoos, a local band who had a song called I Want to Be Your Boyfriend. And one thing that I think helps me be a good lawyer, at least in the music area, is that I'm a musician. And so if somebody comes to me with, for example, a song infringement case, I can listen to their song and the potentially infringing song, and I can, you know, try and pick it out on my guitar or piano and figure out if I think I can sort of do a first screen on these things to see if I feel that these cases have any merit. Of course, you don't want to rely on yourself. Ultimately, you need to get an expert. But it certainly helps to understand not just, for example, the music business, but also music itself, if you want to be a music lawyer. It's not essential, but I think it helps. And then, you know, also technology, I think, would be very helpful to, especially in this day and age when the entertainment business is melding with technology. It's technotainment these days. So the more technology you understand, if you have an engineering background or a science background or a computer programming background, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I would agree with both of you that understanding the business is really critical. I mean, the chief operating officer at Kabam, his first interview question to me was, is Facebook credits illegal? Right? Because at the time, Facebook had just instituted this thing for gaming companies that basically said, you will take Facebook credits as your virtual currency in your games. And by the way, we're going to take 30%. We're just going to take a 30% cut. And to understand that that had happened and to be able to put together an answer kind of like that, that's what they were looking for. So I think understanding the business is key. The other two things that I would say is, if you want to be an entertainment lawyer, there's two tools that you need in your legal toolbox. You need to understand user privacy, and you need to understand IP. You need to have kind of a working understanding of IP. You don't need to be a patent specialist, but to at least understand like how that's going to translate in the entertainment business is important. And I think the last thing is you need to have relationship skills. Whenever you're talking, if you end up going in-house, or even if you end up working at a firm, like you always need to be thinking to yourself, how do I get them to want to come talk to me? That is always, when I think about how I structure my emails, how I structure meetings, that's always a thought that's in the back of my head. So whether that's working on how even you communicate bad news, like, you know, yes, you won't be able to do that, but here's a different way around it. Kind of always having that mentality in all of your interactions with the clients, that's what I would say.
So you pretty much covered what I was going to say, but
Sorry.
No, it's good. So yes, definitely understanding the business. I mean, I think that everybody, just from my experience in the last year, everybody that's in the job market works hard and just knows the law. So on top of that, in order to distinguish yourself, you need to know the business, where the money comes from and where it's going for each particular entertainment property. Relatability to clients and in-house people is really important. Being able to translate legalese into normal language, normal English language, so that it's less intimidating and that people can understand it. That's really valuable to clients, and also for in-house discussions to really be able to translate that legal analysis into like an understandable business risk analysis, more of an economic analysis for them, because they're making a decision based on money and how much it's going to cost to, you know, choose between two difficult decisions. So to be able to really frame it in a risk sort of format is a good way to distinguish yourself.
What they said. You know, being flexible and adaptable to changing technologies, being able to communicate complicated legal concepts into plain English, being able to work with different constituencies, understanding a wide variety of legal disciplines, principles, concepts. But yeah, I think you have to be, it's just a mix of everything, and being curious, interested, reading up on the latest stuff.
Thank you. So what is the most valuable lesson you have learned thus far in your professional career?
Well, boy, there's so many, but I would, one that leaps to mind is just echoing what a number of the panelists said, is developing good social skills, networking skills is really critical. And, you know, obviously you need to be a very good lawyer and do a good job for your clients, but especially if you're a solo practitioner, as I am, it's so critical to be able to network and network effectively. And so I go to a lot of events, like last week, SF Music Tech Summit is a really great event. And I recommend that you check it out. In fact, quite often students can volunteer, do some volunteer work, and then have free access to the event, which is great, so you might consider doing that. I've had a few students who've done that. But in any event, you go to events like that, and people are going to come up to you. They may be very well-established people in the field or in the industry, or they could be wannabe people. But you don't look at them like, gee, who is this pest? Go away. Anyone you talk to could be very valuable to talk to, or just very interesting to talk to. And a year from now, that person could end up being, you know, A&R guy at Sony or in-house at some company. So any connections you can make are extremely valuable, and the more connections you can make, the better. So I urge you to try to, you know, develop connections, even at the stage you are at as students. And in terms of advice, I think that's part of the question, the advice for people. I would say volunteer your time. When I taught a couple of years ago, I had 5 guest speakers in my class who worked at different companies here in the Bay Area. Not one of my students got in touch with any of them to try to seek an internship, which just shocked me. And all the speakers said, we have opportunities. And so, telling you, if you don't have the willingness to go work as an intern at a company or at a firm in this field, it's going to be, you know, that much harder for you to get a foothold into the business. So I really urge you to, you know, try to find the time to do that, take advantage of those opportunities. It's very critical.
Were they going to pay minimum wage?
Were they going to pay minimum wage
for the internship? You know,
Well,
the whole issue now.
yeah, that is an issue, but in many cases, you know, there are credit. You know, at Golden Gate, you can work for credit as an intern, and so that is compensation.
Right.
And there are other ways to deal with that issue. But good question.
I totally agree with everything Tony said. I would say also, for me, I think the 2 most important lessons I've learned, I'm adding one, is first is humility. I mean, you can be kind of arrogant and smart law students like you all are. But, you know, I've learned I'm not always right, and sometimes that takes a number of years to sink in. Also, I think it's important to have something on the side to go to not be completely obsessed with your career. So I would, for myself, it's important to be able to play music on the side, for example. I think the piece of advice I would offer is, apart from what Tony said, again, I'm going to say two. One is, if you want to go into a particular field like music law or film law or something like that, learn as much as you can about how the business operates. We've said that already. That is really important. The more you can show you have that knowledge of the industry, the more the hiring people are going to be interested in you. And the other thing is, really work on your writing. Writing skills are critical. Be able to write a brief or a memo or something that is not full of legalese, but that has really good analysis and good, clear writing. Because we see a lot of bad writing in applicants. And so the people who write the best and who seem to have the most knowledge about the area are the ones who have the leg up.
I think the most valuable lesson is be open to actually following what you're good at. I think when I was at my law firm for 5 years, I was like, I'm going to be a patent litigator and I'm going to figure out how to do this and I'm going to be really good at this. When in reality, what I was actually really good at was managing projects and organizing projects. That's what I was good at, and that is the skill that I use all day, every day, being an in-house lawyer, triage. So I think, as you go along in your career, being very conscious of, the job that I'm in. Am I making the best and highest use of my time? And if not, what's my plan B? I know it's very fluffy, but it's gotten me to where I'm at. I mean, I thought about it when General Mills came calling, and I was like, am I good at being a firm lawyer? I don't know about this. Like, if I look at what skill could I sell to a client, what could I say? Like, I'm really good at managing large-scale document productions. Like, who hires a lawyer for that? No one.
Actually,
right. But I didn't want that, right? I didn't want that to be my career.
That is a good skill.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I was getting sent to like our Denver office to manage teams of contracts lawyers, and I was like, this is not what I want to be doing. But when I was in-house, and all of a sudden I found myself being like, wow, I'm really good at this. I am really good at taking legal advice and breaking it down into components that my clients can actually understand. I'm good at having a conversation about that. So I think that's the piece of advice, is really be open to going along with what you're good at and following that. Because it's no good forcing yourself into a job that you're not good at and you don't love.
I think considering the early stage that I'm at in my career, I'm going to defer mostly to my co-panelists, but a couple things that have worked for me, to reiterate what's been said, is just work really hard and be charitable with your time. If you give people some time, that comes back in valuable ways. And also just, entertainment law, especially in the Bay Area, is a really small world. So just, keep that in mind, be discreet.
I came out of Golden Gate wanting to be a transactional music attorney, and I regretted that I didn't take the litigation and argument classes here, because I think to be a good entertainment lawyer, you really need to run a gamut and have a lot of different experience. So I ended up teaching myself litigation skills, and I think they're critical. If you're taking a case, an adversarial case, I think you should be prepared to take it all the way if you need to. I mean, if you evaluate it as a case that is worthy of taking all the way, or knowing some good litigation counsel. So learning those skills, I think, was really important. I try not to use them. I don't like to go to court. Anything can happen in court. And I've had experiences where it reaffirms that judges don't always know what they're doing, including the digital sampling case with the Beastie Boys versus Diamond, where one of the Ninth Circuit panelists said, well, "What's digital sampling?" He was a very old Reagan appointee. So don't assume that the people who are the ultimate decider are going to be familiar with the area of law. They're going to be a good writer and how to explain these things in simple simple, understandable way. But understand that litigation also is not an end in itself, and that it's good to have the skill, but it's also good to learn how to settle cases. Because going into court, anything can happen. You don't know, what will occur.
If I might just add one thing, Alexandra said, no, figure out what you're good at. A guy I worked with once who was very smart, and venture capitalist actually, gave me some really good advice one time. And he said, figure out what you're not good at. That's really important. Figure out what you're not good at so you know to get other people to do that. And you don't waste your time trying to do those things you're just not good at.
Thank you. And I'm going to go a little off the cuff. I didn't prepare you for this question. But, given our current job market and the limited opportunities for entertainment lawyers and IP lawyers in the Bay Area, is there maybe an alternative route that you would recommend law students taking out of law school to kind of weave their way back into entertainment and IP?
I'm happy to, so, my example is, I went back to, I couldn't afford to work for free. So for me, the fact that my firm gave me the opportunity to come back, it was great. Because I didn't have as many options as other people might have who maybe could go and work for free for an entertainment company. So what I would say is, if you want to be an entertainment lawyer and you know that IP and privacy are the two skill sets that you need, maybe go work for a firm and get that expertise up, and always have something on the side, right? Always be going to, if you want to work in music, going to the local music conventions where you can meet and interface with people. So that would be kind of the sideways way to get at it, is to kind of go to a firm and get the expertise that you need and continue to network on the side so you can make your way back in entertainment.
Yeah, I don't like giving direct advice in the sense of telling you what to do, but I'll just tell you my experience that Alexandra did. When I moved out here from New York, I took the bar exam, and while I was in that awful limbo period awaiting the results, I was volunteering at California Lawyers for the Arts, and also I was working as a law clerk at a firm in the East Bay doing workers' comp. So anything that will pay the bills. You just find something. And as Alan said, any of those experiences can be very good just to broaden you as a lawyer to work in a workers' comp firm. And they had me do a divorce case, which I didn't particularly enjoy, but it was a very valuable experience to have that. And so I think trying to find a balance of focusing on the practice area that you're very interested in, IP or entertainment law, but also getting those other experiences, not shutting the door on doing other things, because A, they can help pay the bills, and B, they do broaden you as a lawyer. Because the work that I do is not just all fancy international license agreements. I'm setting up LLCs, doing lease agreements for my clients sometimes. It's normal lawyerly stuff. So having those experiences is very valuable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's kind of what I was saying before, that it's not, entertainment law is not a field of law, it's an industry. And so almost anything you do in the area of law will translate eventually into an entertainment law type of practice, whether it be leasing law or tax law or intellectual property law or litigation or class actions. Almost anything could fit in ultimately, that kind of experience would ultimately help you in an entertainment law career.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, and just to sort of piggyback on that, there's a lot of ways you can gain skills in non-IP areas that are helpful for IP jobs. Contract drafting, if you become a very good contract drafter, that will be useful. Any litigation skills translate. Yeah, so just do what you can to build those skills that'll translate laterally into entertainment, and also, keep yourself involved in the communities that you want to be involved in.
Yeah, I was just reading a really interesting New Yorker article on San Francisco entrepreneurial culture. And I think, where we live is so unique and so many opportunities out there if you just try to take an indirect path to what you want to do. Just there's a lot of stuff out there that worth exploring that indirectly I think can get you into where you want to be.
Thank you very much. So that concludes our panel. I will open it up to a Q&A, and I encourage you to take this time to ask whatever question you want. We're here for 15 minutes. So, any questions?
I was wondering if you guys could each tell us about one of your favorite cases or transactions that you've done in your career.
Since it's easy to pick out mine because it's only been 10 months or so. When I first started working for a friend who does video game production, he ended up getting a book deal to write a text on video game design. And so it was my first contract negotiation was his book deal. And it went really well, and I've gotten some work as a result of that. It was just kind of exciting because it was new, but it also applied skills that I'd learned here and that I've learned in other aspects of the job.
Coming out of here, I ended up, and I got like a C in the class on communications and all, but I ended up working with a lot of people challenging a ban on low-power radio. So basically, I worked with pirate radio broadcasters and came up with a lot of legal arguments. And it turned into this sort of little grassroots movement that got the FCC ultimately to change their policy and start licensing low-power radio. Actually, this week we were supposed to start filing. There was a filing window for it, but the government shut down, so we can't do that. But in any event, they do now allow that. So it became this kind of national movement, and it just came out of working with some concepts I thought of here, and an interest in the area, and hooking up with some other attorneys in the Bay Area, meeting some crazy activists in the Bay Area, and it worked out really well. So it shows that you can make a difference, with the skills that you're developing here, doing whatever it is you want to do.
I mean, right now I'm in the middle of a couple of really big multi-million-dollar transactions, which are really exciting, interesting things. But the things that you remember in a way very fondly are the things that maybe the first time you did something. When I first got admitted, I did a litigation matter, handled a litigation matter, which was maybe the last one I ever handled. But it was a copyright infringement case, and then that actually led me to take on one more, which was one that I'll never forget. Also copyright infringement involving a band called the Charlatans, a local band from the 60s. I'm sure some of you guys might remember them. And their master recordings were bootlegged all over the world. They lost control of everything they ever recorded. And so I literally had to track down master recordings that were floating around in Europe and licensed to different companies. And we got all these tapes back in their control, and then we were able to officially get them out in the marketplace. And so that's probably, in a way, the most satisfying thing I ever did, just to help these guys. I got a little piece of the action, and to this day, I still represent the Charlatans, and it's a thrill to have a case like that right out of law school, where you're thinking, I've really helped these guys, just like what Alan said. So that's a great experience I'll never forget.
Well, I think my most fun or memorable case was called Gilbert versus Bearwell. This had to do with the film Moulin Rouge, and probably some of you have seen it. And there was a song in there called "Come What May," which was the only actually original song in the film. All the other songs were like Paul McCartney or Beatles or all covers. So, but "Come What May" was sort of the theme of the lovers in the film. So it was an important song. And it was written by Kevin Gilbert and Dave Bearwald, who were actually two of the writers on the Tuesday Night Social Club album for Sheryl Crow. And they wrote the song, and then shortly after they wrote it, Kevin Gilbert died, very young. And then a couple of years later, Dave Bearwald got the song into the film, but he told him he wrote it himself. And so he figured this film wasn't going to go anywhere, no one would notice, but unfortunately for him, it's kind of like the producers. The film actually got successful, and the song got nominated for a Golden Globe. So it was too successful for him. And the word got out to Kevin Gilbert's executor of his estate, and people started calling him because people knew that Kevin had co-written a song, and they called him up and they said, hey, congratulations on the Golden Globe nomination. And he's going, what? For what? Well, for Moulin Rouge. What are you talking about? Well, anyway, so we ended up filing a lawsuit. Bearwald started denying that Kevin Gilbert had had anything to do with the song. And the best moment in the case was when my client, who was the executor of Kevin Gilbert's estate, found a videotape from Kevin's wake, at which Dave Bearwald performed, pulled out his guitar, started playing a song, and he said, okay, I'm now going to play a song that Kevin and I wrote just before he died. So, when we presented that videotape, Dave Bearwald's position changed. Well, it didn't change. What he said was, well, and this is probably not a good defense for those of you who are going to be defense lawyers. His defense was, I was lying at the time, and I always lie. I'm a liar. And he had evidence of that in things he had written, which he said were lies, about his life. So I lie about everything. I was lying about that too. I actually did write it myself. Well, the case eventually settled.
One of the things that I've had to learn as an in-house lawyer is to always assume that the client is serious. No matter how crazy the idea is, it's probably not a joke. And I learned that the hard way. It was one of my last projects at General Mills. By that time, I'd started off being a trademark lawyer for them, and then as I started progressing in my career, I started becoming what are called divisional lawyers there. Every single business at General Mills has a general business lawyer who kind of handles everything. And towards the end of my time there, I was the divisional lawyer for Pillsbury, which of course involves the Doughboy. So one of my last meetings there, we're in a meeting, and Pillsbury is the second largest business at General Mills. And so we're in a room with two different advertising agencies, the division president of Pillsbury, kind of her second in command, and we're about to get pitched on this idea. And the advertising agency starts rolling the rough cut of the ad that they're proposing, and it is the Doughboy having a mental breakdown a la David Hasselhoff, like in a limo with strippers, with champagne, and I'm like, they had known that I was leaving to take another job, and so I had assumed that they had done this like big prank and that it was just a big joke, so I start laughing out loud. And no one else is laughing, and I'm like, oh. So, out of all kind of my moments in my career that stick in my brain, that lesson is with me, and now I know they got to start laughing first before you laugh. That's how you know.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this question is for Tony. In your transition from talent representation into more of the licensing and software elements of your career, was that transition intentional? And then how do you set up your compensation structure for these licensing deals?
My compensation structure. Okay. Okay. Well, there's probably a long answer there. I'll try to make a shorter answer out of it. You know, just being in San Francisco in the 1990s, the late 90s, all of a sudden, all this stuff started happening with these online companies, and there was a moment where I remember it very well. I was reading Billboard magazine, and there was an article about this company called IUMA, the Internet Underground Music Archive, based in Santa Cruz. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. Online distribution of music, and for indie artists, this is really cool. And out of the blue, I got a call from a friend who said, hey, you know, a really good friend of mine is the president of IUMA. Would you like to talk to them? They're thinking of getting new counsel. And wow, yeah. And so that kind of snowballed into then getting eMusic as a client, and on, all these companies just rolling in every week. And so I said, this is great. I love it. It's very lucrative. It's very exciting. And so I really just kind of staked out that turf, and just sort of happened that way. But I saw it happening, but it was also kind of lucky that I was in the right place at the right time. In terms of compensation, you know, clients expect you to be very flexible these days. And if you're just the hourly guy, and look, there's some firms in the Valley and down in LA, they're charging $1,000 an hour. And clients at a certain point aren't digging that, you know, and they're looking for people who are a little more creative in their structure. So whether, you know, you have a more flexible billing rate perhaps, or you have a situation where you're on a monthly retainer, that happens sometimes, you're on a project fee to do certain things on a project basis. The thing I really do try to keep away from is the equity participation thing. It's usually just smoke and mirrors and you're gonna get burned ethically and in many different ways, so try to keep away from that.
So is that what you told Google when they?
I missed out on that.
Is that okay?
Yeah, well, just so you never try to take like a back end in like percentage in.
Never say never. I mean, there are situations that warrant, you know, a different view of that, and you know, whether you're getting participation in a particular deal or you're getting equity in a company, I wouldn't say that never happens, but you know, it's less common in my personal experience to do that.
I'm just wondering what the best way is to approach somebody like for volunteer opportunity, like at this level where we're 1Ls and like I'm in the HLP program, and you know, should I be starting to look now and like sending out contacts now for volunteer opportunities for next summer, or how should I go about that, or what's the best way? Who would you pick? There are a bunch of emails.
Well, I would say, you know, you want to be bold and be focused at the same time. So decide what you're really into, and then do some research about who's active in that area. But also, one of the most inspiring things about my experience over the last 10 months has been, or maybe 2 years, has been how available and willing people are to help law students. You know, people are very busy, so you have to be understanding of that, but reach out to people via LinkedIn. It's always helpful to have a connection to the people you're. So one thing I do these days is if there's somebody I want to meet, you can do a LinkedIn search for the connections that you might have to them, and then get a soft introduction through them. And also just, you know, you probably have people in your network that you're not aware of. Really think about like your friends and your family and your professional connections, and I've made a lot of connections that are like second, third degree just by continuing to sort of reach out and, you know, buy people coffee, buy people a drink, that sort of thing.
Great.
Any other questions? I just had one more, if that's all right. So this is directed at all of you. You guys can all answer, or any of you. But what is you all talked about this area of the law changing very rapidly. What excites you / scares you about the law as you see it in 5 to 10 to 20 years?
Well, I can speak to what scares me. As a class action lawyer, the legal landscape has gotten very, very difficult for not so much class action lawyers, but for people, for consumers, for employees in particular, with the Supreme Court decisions in the last few years that have really curtailed the ability of people to join in class actions and sue. And I'm talking about the cases that, for example, the AT&T Mobility versus Concepcion case in particular, which said that an arbitration clause that prohibited class actions was valid, even if it's in a contract of adhesion. And it's almost impossible to get around those things right now. And every corporation and every employer is putting arbitration clauses in their agreements with their employees and their customers. And so the playing field is being shifted tremendously in favor of the strong and the powerful and against the weak and the ordinary people. And there's really, it's a very disturbing trend, and the only way to really do anything about that probably is political. And also if there's a change in the makeup of the Supreme Court.
Well, I would answer in a slightly different way, maybe not focusing so much on the law, but just the industry itself. And you know, I see this as a great time of opportunity. A couple of years ago, a few years ago, I was a co-keynote speaker at a music industry conference, and the other keynote speaker was a colleague of mine who was a good friend, but he had a very dim view of the industry. In his remarks, he was basically saying, this ship has sunk. You know, the music industry has already sunk. No one knows how to make money anymore. And I got up and I said the exact opposite of that, which is, I think it's a time of great opportunity. Yes, there are dire, you know, very, very complex and disturbing trends in terms of artist revenue that, you know, Alan alluded to, and, you know, our works in progress to see how that plays out. But on the other hand, there are unbelievable opportunities to distribute content out through many different channels of distribution. And so that presents great opportunities for me and for all of you who are going to be part of all that growth. And keep an eye on, you know, not just what's happening now, but where things are going. Try to think about where are things heading and look for those opportunities. Because if you're just thinking about, I want to do record deals, well, there are a bunch of lawyers in LA who do record deals, and in New York. And you need to establish a point of difference and maybe think about where things are going instead of where things were or where things are.
Patent litigation scares me. It does. The gaming, the kind of the free-to-play industry is insane. Like last year we had the top grossing app on the App Store, and that was making, at its height, $5 million a month. This year, Clash of Clans is making insane. It's like $60 million, and there's a game called Puzzles and Dragons that is only in Japan, and they make $100 million a month. You can just imagine what's going to happen to that when it comes to the United States. That's a ton of money, and you know that people are going to be looking to get their hands on some of that. And because the concept of patenting stuff is something that is pretty new in free-to-play gaming, I think that's kind of the next frontier in what I think about.
I think that to piggyback on what Tony was saying, that I organized a music seminar, and the keynote speaker that we had there was an old music lawyer, a very well-reputed music lawyer, and I was trying to focus on the opportunities that are involved with digital, and there was sort of a dark perspective on that. But I think that, you know, there's a lot of opportunity there in terms of like how digital is shaping entertainment law. There's a lot of really interesting policy work that's being done in the Bay Area. You know, the EFF is here. There's 5 or 6 excellent law schools with, you know, students like you guys working on review articles. It's a fascinating time. It should be really interesting next 10 years.
In the copyright realm, termination rights are finally kind of coming around and being coming into play for a lot of old artists, and that's a really interesting area. It's kind of wide open right now. It's just, the cases are just coming in. It's really disheartening. A lot of cases where the statute of limitations prevents co-authors, for instance, like in Nick's example, from coming out if they didn't know 10, 15 years ago somebody had registered a copyright with the Copyright Office and omitted their name. There's not a lot they can do due to statute of limitations issues. So, you know, I worry where the law is going in that direction. On the other hand, you know, termination rights, there's some really interesting things that could happen.
Thank you very much.